Hello, everyone, and welcome to Café New Canadians, a virtual event series that's brought to you by New Canadians, a TV and web based show that connects newcomers to valuable information on immigration, settlement, education, employment, and entrepreneurship, and many more such topics in Canada so that you too can succeed over here. You can follow us on Omni TV, wherein we share weekly episodes. You can also follow us on our website and connect with us, share all our content that we keep posting there. You could also at the same time view our content on YouTube. I'm your host today, Shruti Dargan, and I'm pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Pedro Afif, a professional coach and trained psychotherapist who will be joining us today and talking about the topic, which is living the lockdown life with emotional intelligence. Welcome, Pedro.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. And before we start talking about the topic today, I would like to remind the viewers that you can connect with us, share your questions over here on Zoom and also on YouTube, wherein we're live streaming this webinar. You could keep posting your questions via the Q&A tab here or in the chat section on YouTube. Now, let's get to the webinar. This is today, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be talking about living the lockdown life with emotional intelligence. Now, of course, the lockdown life has not been easy for all of us over here in Canada or anywhere in the world. And it's been a difficult journey for everyone. And everyone's trying their level best to kind of keep going. And as they say, keep calm and carry on. It's not been very easy. So, Pedro, I'd like to just start with what is it that you think of? What are the typical challenges that some people have been facing in this period ever since the lockdown began, or ever since the scare around coronavirus, because of coronavirus it began?
Yeah, I find that other than the health threat, uncertainty, and facing something unknown is what I find and what I've heard that is the most unnerving, right? We don't know how, or the hows and the whens of things. We have no answers. Our minds are not ready for this, like, and I think that is the greatest thing that shakes us, the lack or the change in the known routines and the loss of boundaries from the known and the unknown. In an overall, is what shakes us most. And a pandemic, and this, like, viewing this as an environment that is non-conducive to being calm, or that naturally leads to worry. The unknown is constant, and I find that is what is affecting most of us.
Of course, as you said, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with something like this. And as our topic suggests today, that it's all about trying to cope with the times and trying to make use of whatever time we have at home, and do it well with emotional intelligence. So let's dive straight into what exactly is emotional intelligence. If you could just tell our viewers a little about what is emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
Maybe
for sure.
everyone has different perceptions of that, and how is it that right now it can be used as a great tool to battle this anxiety and stress that's all around us?
Of course. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Awesome.
Loud and clear.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen just to give folks a visual as to what emotional intelligence is. So emotional intelligence is, or is it? Here it is. In simple words, emotional intelligence is the ability that every human being has to identify with awareness, to notice and willingly respond at the moment to what we are feeling, as well as to our environment, right? So the people that is surrounding us. So just to round it up, emotional intelligence is the ability to know what I'm feeling as I am feeling it, instead of knowing what I'm feeling after I already responded or reacted or took action that I did not necessarily want it. That is a key thing. It's the ability to be aware as things are happening, and the willingness to respond with awareness so that my actions go where I want them to go, right? Um, did that answer, is that an answer that is friendly, that is easy to grasp? Sometimes I get very involved in the subject. So
Definitely. No, that's an easy answer and something that I think all of us would be able to understand well and maybe imbibe as well.
awesome. So a good way to picture emotional intelligence is with scenarios, right? It sounds like a very fancy term, but to be honest, it is something that we all have. It is within our reach, regardless of who we are, um, and you can view it in your daily life. You can assess how much are you in tune with this ability. With some scenarios here, I'm showing you some that are most of them my case, or people that I know cases. You can wonder, like, if you're a parent, right, and your child is crying, how do you usually respond? Do you respond with a, hey, like, how are you, is everything well? Do you respond with anger, with worry? Do you notice how you're responding, and has this response changed during the pandemic? It's something that many people are noticing. My responses are different now than they were before, with the same situation. Um, and while that can be a very lengthy topic, we can assess it in different ways, right? Like, I'm having some financial stretches. What is that making me feel, and how am I responding? Or I lost my job. I did not see this coming. How am I responding? Did I notice that I got very sad and I responded that way? Or did I notice when I already threw a fit and perhaps, I don't know, overate? Not my case, of course. Et cetera, et cetera. So there are many, many scenarios where you can um, match your circumstances and wonder, am I making use of my self-awareness and noticing how I'm feeling while I'm feeling it? And while this can be very complex because we all have different situations, there's a very simple way to frame this. So I'm going to share a visual with you folks. Um, this is a matrix from Yale University. It's the most simple way that I have found to understand emotions, right? Through emojis and colors, regardless of who we are, pandemic or no pandemic, in quarantine or not, your emotions fall in these four buckets, and they are differentiated by two variables: the level of energy of the emotion and the pleasantness of the emotion. So, for example, right, you have a high energy emotion, but low pleasure. It produces low pleasure. You can, and there are some names, right? So when we are frightened or enraged, your body physically, it feels very heightened, but it's not feeling nice. At the same time, when you have a high energy emotion, but you feel nice, we call it like, I'm super excited, and we feel festive. Same energy, but different quality. The same way with the low energy version, right? When we are low energy and displeasure, then we feel despair, hopeless. It doesn't feel nice. But again, there are some times where we are in a low energy emotion, but it feels nice. So regardless of what's happening, we can pinpoint our emotions to these four buckets. And the magic of this is that when we use a tool like this, we can put language in the physical sensation, which helps us again to put awareness. And the more aware that we are, the more that we know what to do. What is happening now in this pandemic environment, call it sort of way? Most of the emotions are flowing to the displeasure axis right? And it's pretty obvious. Like if we assess what's happening, like there are layoffs, financial loss, people are losing their livelihood, certainty is gone out the window. There's a health threat outside, right? Plus, what we said in the beginning, right? Part of the most triggering things are that we're not used to this routine of being home 24/7. When these things happen, our mental health gets affected, yes or yes, right? And there is one little thing that creates this rush of emotions that may seem irrational. And this is just a nerdy fact. But imagine that you are in a mall, right? And you are minding your own business, eating chocolate, and then you see 300 individuals running that way. Like you being that person that is just standing there, like you don't wonder, oh, I wonder if they have a good reason to run. Like you run with them because instinctively you assume that something's going on and you survive. And that is an instinct that we have as humans. We follow the herd. This is the phenomenon that triggered people to hoard toilet paper, right? We all assumed that it was gonna go out of stock. So people followed. When that happens, which is characteristic of a pandemic like now, your rational mind is not always available.
Yes.
So we have a bit of an issue sometimes, following the mass mindset versus stepping back and saying, hey, what is really happening and how can I respond to it? And the mix of these conditions impact our mental health. How was that for an answer?
Very good, definitely.
Yeah.
I think what you've managed to do very easily is break down a very complex topic. As I said earlier, emotional intelligence is something that everyone may understand in bits and pieces, but these seem like really hard things to grasp.
Yes.
And this actually, if could I maybe move on to a question that is
Yeah,
related to it right now, which is, like as you were talking, I was just thinking about how many people do you think even realize the fact that they might be facing that kind of anxiety or stress? It's just something that came to my mind as we were talking, that oftentimes what happens is one doesn't really realize that they might be facing something like that.
yeah.
It often comes out in the form of, say, frustration. It often comes out in the form of some other stress without really realizing it. Does it happen too often with people? Do you come across
Yeah.
this situation?
So this is funny that you asked, because during the last webinars that we have done, we threw out a poll and we asked, do you notice that you are aware of what you're feeling as you feel it? Which means I get triggered and immediately or very closely I have a name for that emotion and I know where it is. Or do you remember that you felt that way? It's like, oh, I must have been very angry, right? But that already passed. About 60% did not notice what was happening while it was happening and could name it. And a mix of other answers that led more towards I'm not aware at the moment. Right.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's a great majority that don't know or don't notice because we don't have the habits to do so.
Yes.
I think that I may stop sharing just so that we can see our faces again.
Sure. This also, actually, another thing that I found very interesting in the presentation that you just shared with us was the 4 emotions that you listed. And, how is it that we possibly don't realize how it's been affecting us all along, or we react a certain way, not paying much attention to why we've been doing that. I'm sure this has also raised a lot of questions in the minds of our viewers right now, who must be really coming up with a lot of questions that they're eager to ask us. So I'll just remind everyone, keep posting your questions in the Q&A tab to us on Zoom, or you could share them in the chat section on YouTube as well. We're live streaming this, and soon enough we'll start answering those questions. Pedro, live over here, will be answering those questions for you.
Yes, for sure.
So let them be personal. We've got professional advice today. Okay, so moving on, now this brings me to think about a lot of times what happens is the mind, of course, understands. The human mind is evolved enough to understand exactly, tell right from wrong. But in situations of crisis, often what happens is we go into a denial mode. Does that,
Yeah.
am I right here?
Yes. And the thing is that, so denial it's like the ugly duckling of emotions. Well, it's not really an emotion, but it's like the ugly duckling of responses, because rarely leads to somewhere positive. Nonetheless, denial is a coping mechanism. And we make use of it mostly or almost always unaware of what we're doing, because we are afraid that we will not be able to cope with what's out there, with reality. It's really, really common. We don't like to see it, so we don't see it. It's selective perception. It's a human mechanism. Yeah, it is completely true. And we
So then how then would you say that, how can, so I have a two-parter question over here for you.
yeah.
One, how can we prevent that from happening in the first place? And
Okay.
second, if one realizes soon after or maybe much later in that phase that they have been in this denial mode, how can one get out of it?
Okay. So how do you prevent denial? Well, the first thing to do to change anything is to notice it. So I would say there is no preventing denial without practice. We need to start being open to things being uncomfortable, because we deny what we don't like. So if we start taking on a mindset of things may not go the way that I want to, but I'm going to see them anyway. I mean, they're happening out there, whether you like it or not. So if you deny them, we can do nothing about it. So more than preventing denial, I think that it's a practice of embracing, of leaning into reality, because it's happening. There's a pandemic out there, whether we deny it or not. It's just a matter of, do we face it and respond in the best way possible, or we pretend it doesn't exist, right?
That brings me to the second part now,
Yes.
which is if you're in denial and you end up realizing that, how is it that you can get yourself out of it soon enough?
Okay. So I'm a big fan of self-talk. So think about it this way. If you trace your feelings, you can always trace them back to a thought. And if you listen to what you're thinking, you can notice that it's almost as if you had a TV show in your mind telling you things. And if you listen closely, you can hear these conversations, right? So talking to yourself about what's happening actually produces peace of mind, because it allows you to put awareness and focus into things that are happening. So talking to yourself may sound crazy, but it is a great tool. It is a very wise tool. It allows for consciousness to grow. Another way to get out of there is to differentiate from risk and fear. We deny what we're afraid of by nature. If you take a step back and think about this, risk is pure mathematics, right? There is a risk of the COVID-19 pandemic going all the way to next year. Is it a big risk? I don't know, right? Is it a possibility? Perhaps. Is it probable? No idea. But fear, on the other hand, fear is this image that I create in my mind with my own personal catastrophe affecting my own life. And when I don't differentiate what's like the risk versus the fear, I get wrapped up in my own imagination. Being aware that the risk of things happening is different from the fear that I have for the worst case scenario to happen, is a great, great mechanism to be able to look at reality. Because again, we don't look at what scares us, because we either run, or we fight it, or we just become invisible. Becoming invisible is denial.
Yeah. So you mentioned fear right now. Now, of
Yes.
course, we're living in times wherein being aware of what's happening around us is important too. There's a lot of news consumption. With that, there's a lot of fake news consumption,
Yep.
which also adds to fear, which also further adds to anxiety. So there's a very thin line which is now dividing this uh, absorption of information, awareness, and say this fear.
Yep.
How can one tread that without kind of falling in the dark space, or how can one deal with the daily frustrations that come out of it
So what I'm hearing is, how can one become more aware without getting like
without
surrounded
being scared?
by? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So that is very important, because we have an overload of information nowadays. We have important news, and we have social media. And this is one of the easiest, but at the same time is one of the hardest, because we are so fond of our cell phones that we don't want to let it go. Nonetheless, scheduling the amount, like the moments of the day when you are, let's say, allowed to check on COVID information,
Yeah.
works. If you give yourself a moment in the morning, say, hey, I want to dedicate this moment in my morning to get updated about what I need to know, and perhaps set notifications for the Prime Minister and the Premier and whatever it is that you need to know, then you will guarantee that you are informed. But if you get wrapped up into the collective consciousness of fear, then you will nourish that fear, right? There is this curve that I didn't have prepared because I didn't know I was going to say this, but it's this great curve that shows how people that express their opinion the most are the people that know the least. I swear, this is research. The more that someone knows about a topic, the more that they're hesitant to express their opinion, because they know how much information there is out there. But the less that they know, the more, with more ease, they talk about things. And this happened with COVID. Everyone is a COVID expert.
Yeah. Social media has made us that, right?
Yeah, and we get wrapped up in that fear consciousness. So filtering your source of information is essential, so that you know what you need to know, you're aware of what you need to know, you know how to and what to respond, but filter what is unnecessary and unessential.
Yeah. Let's take an audience question.
Yeah,
So there's a question that has been asked, which is, I've been experiencing, like, my emotions have been fluctuating. I'll read it out to you. So I've been experiencing fluctuating emotions for a while. Some days I'm happy, some days I'm feeling a lot of despair. How can I deal with it best?
So the best thing that I get it, because it's been the same for me, to be honest. And I guess for a lot of people, the first thing that I would do is I would tell you to be very kind to yourself. There is a raise in expectations of what we should or should not be doing during this quarantine times. I would tell you, be very kind to yourself, and be very mindful of what you expect of yourself at the end of the day. And be mindful to not be demanding that much, right? So if feeling a bit lower is getting you frustrated, do cut yourself some slack. Be very, very kind and compassionate. That'd be number one. Also, I would, this is like the most used advice, but it works. I would tell you to journal on what actually is keeping you grateful. The reason that this works is you have control over two things in life. One, your focus, where you put your attention to, and two, how you respond, the actions that you take. And you get to choose how to use them. Again, this is not positive thinking. This is merely being optimistic. Um, Things are happening out there, whether you want it or not. And in spite of that, you can choose to focus on what's good. It does not mean denying what's wrong or bad, but it means that you get to focus on what's good. So I would say be kind, and journaling and listing what you're grateful for are two great strategies. There are many, 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 but these are the most basic.
You mentioned gratitude, I mean, of course, I think it's just a personal choice. Some people choose to look at it as this is a good time for us to reflect on everything that we've had so far. No one saw this coming. So, of course, it's a good time to, again, just think about, okay, things can get better from here. Some people, however, choose to look at the opposite side, which
Yes.
is going into that panic mode, which is, we really don't know how long this is going to last. How is it going to affect us? There's just no idea how to manage all of this. So, of course, it's a choice that one has to make, which brings me to talk about that control over your emotions.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
On control
choosing
over your
choosing to
emotions.
focus. What I mean here is choosing to focus on what is in my control rather than looking at the outer picture, which is just not in my control in any way. What's
Yeah.
happening out there, I cannot do anything except for following these instructions and the regulations, and keeping myself safe, and of course helping others be safe as well.
Yeah. Okay. So first, I would tell you, it is my experience that um, we tend to only look, or only want to look at what's good when, let me see if this makes sense, and do tell me if it makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Got what's good when it makes what's wrong disappear, right? So it's either it's good or it's bad, but it doesn't work that way. Uh, this is an awful situation, and at the same time, there are a lot of good things happening, and they both can happen at the same time. Being able to um, to be okay with that reality makes good ground to start like being more resilient, because you may not be able to annihilate what's wrong, but it doesn't annihilate what's good either. So both things happen at the same time, right? In terms of the other part of that question, um, I would say that there are two key things. We love, we this, like, everyone's going to understand this, and I love it, because we've all heard expectations, right? Expectations are the source of all frustration, and it is not the exception at this time. We all want to be certain about when things are going to change. We all want to know, and this is not exclusive from COVID-19. This is every day in a regular day in the life. We want to know how things are going to go. We want to be certain. The thing with certainty is that certainty is not available for the future. It is not. I mean, you can be certain of what happened and of what's happening, but you're not certain of what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, things may disappear. I don't know. It may rain stones. Who knows? But certainty is this thing that we want because we are afraid of risk. We are afraid of things not going the way that we want. We are afraid of things not going according to plan. We want to control them, like you said, right? We are focusing a lot on the exterior. So think about it this way. When we think certainty, we think, when are things out there going to come back to normal? I want to
Yeah.
know. I want to know when, so that I can plan my life accordingly. Well, the answer is you don't get to know, because certainty is unavailable. But on the other hand, clarity is a completely different thing. Clarity is a point of view. It's a way of looking at life. It's clarity is a standpoint from your response to things. And if you think about it carefully, clarity is available always. I'm clear about what I'm doing now. I'm clear about what I did yesterday, and I'm clear that I'm going to respond this way if this happens, right?
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to respond that way, but clarity is an intention. And it focuses on me, on how I'm planning to. It focuses on awareness. And again, it leverages the two things that I have control over, where I put my attention and how I respond with action. So for folks, and when it happens to me as well, when we want to control things out there, I would say just take a deep breath, surrender to the fact that you have no control. I mean, honestly, people resist this surrendering to the no control idea, but you don't have control anyway. So surrender to the fact that you have no control over what happens on the outside, and get a clear intention. How are you going to respond to things when they come, if they come? Did I answer?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
You're actually, I mean, as you kept talking, I could just think about how is it that you're talking about things that are very, very relatable here. And as I said earlier, we don't possibly look at it with the lens of, say, emotional intelligence,
Yes.
but these are things that happen to each one of us. As you kept talking, I was thinking about, like, have there been times when I was thinking like this? What did I do about it? I just went back into that mode when I was constantly thinking about how I've been reacting to this situation presented. Um, and of course, I think emotional intelligence, break it down very, very simply, it's about staying positive, right? uh,
It is, yes, emotional intelligence, as a result, it opens the possibility of staying in a positive mindset. Um,
Using a few tools that can
Using a few
help you do
tools,
that.
yes. One of my greatest teachers once told me, like, everyone can handle the truth. It doesn't mean that you're gonna like it,
Yeah.
but if you look at it, then you can choose how to respond, and you can always choose something more optimistic.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, I mean, and I can relate to that so much because my partner is, I sound like a broken record when I say this, because I say this to anyone, but my partner is opening a restaurant, right? Worst time to open a restaurant. And when this started, we got freaked out a lot because we didn't know what was going to happen. And as it happened, we were able to cope more with some good tools and strategies, saying like, hey, so when this and if this happens, then I may respond in this other fashion, right?
Yes.
And there are some tricks that I can share with you about how to plan your responses.
Yes. But before we go there, because we were talking about emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and of course, questions that are being put forward over here are proof of the fact that people are really interested in the concept. There's a question here from Raymond on YouTube. He shared it on in the light chat section on YouTube. Is there a TED talk or a book that you would highly recommend on this topic of emotional intelligence?
Okay.
Um,
So yes.
yeah,
Okay.
please go
So
ahead.
so there's like the Bible in emotional intelligence. It is not the source, but Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence book. It's very friendly, research strong, and it's based on the original research on emotional intelligence. That is the most basic. It's very psychology oriented. Um, in case you want to understand the term of emotional intelligence, if what you want is to leverage it, I would always go to either one of the two basics of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, and on top of that, self-management. And self-awareness is always available when you are present. So there's a very popular book. It's called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and it's fantastic. It's great. It brings your attention to your body, to what's happening now. It explains with great detail and in a very simplistic and simple way why and how we resist paying attention to what's happening. the power of now would be one of my great recommendations.
Yeah. Let's take another audience question.
Yeah.
So this has come anonymously to us. This person is asking, a close friend just lost his job today and he's facing financial stress as well as emotional crisis. What is the best way that his wife or family can help here?
Okay. So the first thing is, this may sound harsh, and I say it with all, very lightly, because I resonate with financial struggle. You need to surrender to the fact that you're struggling. You have no idea the amount of times that pride gets in the way of us asking for help. Surrender, like allow yourself to look at reality the way it is. Right? This is happening. Once you see what's happening, I'm going to answer with a metaphor. Okay. They say that we don't die from falling to the river. We die from staying underwater.
Well said.
So when, if you got your head stuck underground because you lost your job, imagine that you're a seed. How may this moment pressure cook you into thinking of different alternatives? Most of the struggle of abrupt changes is coping. It's just getting out of denial. And again, this is not financial advice, right? I'm not a financial expert, but in a terms of mindset, when you are able to deal and surrender with this is what's happening, it did happen, and the easier that I make peace that this happened, the faster that I'm going to be able to spring back and look for opportunities in this crisis, right? Which takes me to this tool, like for people that may or may not face any kind of struggle. Like, think about it this way. Use your clarity. Imagine, if this happens, if I start struggling with this, then what will I do? How will I respond? I was talking to someone this morning that was telling me, I did an inventory of my pantry, and I realized that I spend 20% of my grocery shopping in cans. Turns out that if you soak beans and legumes, they cost you 10%, and you do the same things, right? But this option, this out of the box thinking, is rarely available when we are like this. So that would be my response.
Yeah. And what about panic buying? You mentioned, how people went into that panic buying toilet paper, and of course, the situation has become better now. But it's just amazing how panic and times of distress make us do things that we never thought we would, and there's just so much fear all around. And there's a question related to that as well. Maybe now is a good time to ask that.
Yeah.
Preeti Gehlawat has asked us that, this time is really challenging for people financially as well as emotionally.
Yes.
What she's largely asking is that it's difficult to keep oneself motivated every day. It's a difficult task, especially because of the news that you keep hearing. She says that people keep telling you about deaths and suicides and riots and whatnot around in the situation as well. And she chooses not to watch the news, but then, these things are still fed into the mind. So
Yeah.
how is it that one can deal with this situation?
Yeah. So I heard a key word there, right? Motivation. And again, I'm going to go back to what we spoke before. You have no control over the news, right? Or over social media or the collective consciousness, but you do have a choice to tap into that and to plan your day accordingly. What I would respond to this is, there is a misconception that action is triggered by motivation, right? So we always want to say, okay, I don't feel like going to the gym. I've been there 1,000 times. So, right? Or I don't feel like going to work or innovating or making an effort or whatever it is. I don't feel like it. So as I don't feel like it, I don't do it. And then I'm wondering, when am I going to feel motivated to go and pursue whatever I need to respond to my situation, right? So
Yeah.
the thing about that is that motivation, contrary to what we all believe, it is not the source of action. Action is the source of motivation. And think about it like this. When you are feeling the most motivated is as you are doing something. Like it is rare that we get like super excited and ready to go before, like we always get there while we do it. So my answer would be, if you want to get motivated, start taking action. Whatever it is that you are planning to do it, regardless if you don't feel like it. And notice how motivation springs and gets higher and higher the more that you take action. It is the other way around. Action triggers motivation.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Let me present you another situation.
Yeah.
So, of course, we talked about news. Now, news is something that you can turn off, right? You can choose to kind of shut it out of your lives.
Yeah.
You can't really do that with family members. So,
Sure.
how do you tackle a situation wherein you have family members who either get too paranoid or
Yeah.
are constantly affected by everything that they're hearing about, or forget news for a minute, but in general, if they have been dealing with a lot of panic, or if they feel that anxiety much more than you do, or possibly you don't at all, um, you of course want them to be at peace as well.
Yeah.
Now that's again a tricky situation. Now you are positive, the family members aren't. How do you balance it
Well, that is one of the simplest and hardest questions at the same time,
out?
right? Because it really depends on our family dynamic. Nonetheless, think about it like this. This question is super relevant because we are enclosed in the same space. So there's no running away. So we need to cope with it. The first thing that I would tell you is, I think that we need to start being okay with the fact that people are going to respond differently, right? There is this saying that you can either be right or be happy. Well, this is a great moment to be happy. And again, going back to leaning to reality, what's really happening, right? So my partner is being super negative and it's frustrating. It is. Am I willing to, for my mental health, let him or her be unhappy and catastrophic? I mean, perhaps yes, right? I would love for them to change and look at a better angle, but that's what's happening. That would be my number one. And after that, this happens a lot when we have like this aha moments of, oh my God, like this is a great moment for change. What a better way to grow my business or grow my awareness or build my meditation practice than being enclosed at home. But perhaps the other party or folks are not looking at it this way. So I would tell you, lead by example. Trying to convince someone only creates resistance. Lead by example. Like if you're having a great aha moment and you are making very good use of the situation, lead by example and share with them how and why it's being great for you and get them inspired instead of wanting to change their mind. It may not happen.
Yeah. So you've talked about a lot of situations so far. You've shared some wonderful tips. I think it will make it easier for the viewers to also be able to relate to it in terms of if you could give some examples. So from the discussions, from the interactions that you may have had with a lot of people, given your profession, um, could you maybe share a few anecdotes or situations that typically happen in each of our lives?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so I'm going to mix the answer with a
Yeah.
tool that I love that is called a clarity statement.
Okay.
Okay. And clarity statements are a sort of evolved affirmation that trick the mind uh, into anchoring action. So I'm going to show you like some of what I've gone through and what folks, friends, and clients and patients have gone through. Again, so I told you like my partner opening a restaurant, right? So a lot of frustration, fear of losing all the savings. Clarity statements work because of this. You can see what's happening, you abandon certainty, and you focus on clarity. So you formulate it like this: as this happens, or when this happens, I'm going to respond like this. So for example, if I run out of money to pay rent for my restaurant that is not operating, how can I respond that better serves me, right? And then you create a plan. So perhaps I will apply for a government benefit, or I will contact my support system, or I will think of a different stream. And then that opens the possibility for different action. And again, my mother, I have a baby nephew, and well, she's a grandma, and she wants to see him. So she tells me like what she's doing after having a little chat is, when I feel sad and anxious about not being able to be close to my family, well, then I'm going to make use of these resources. For a woman who is 75 years old, going and FaceTiming is not the most obvious choice. So for her, connecting, when I feel like this, I'm going to respond this way, makes a plan and anchors her mind into action. And you can use this structure of when, if, then, I will for any situation, right? Parents that they were planning May 6th, I'm gonna send my kids back to school. Well, not anymore. May 31st. If so, people are saying, if schools don't open May 31st, then I will respond like this. So structuring your thought process in that structure opens the possibility for action and response, which works way better than just like looking at what happens in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. We've still got about 10 odd minutes, so I think we can try and answer as many questions as
Yeah,
possible.
of course.
We've also got viewers joining us from different parts of the world. Some people who are interested in moving to Canada and have not done so far. There's a question that we've received, which is for brand new arrivals or newcomers arriving to Canada precisely at this current time, how do you manage expectations? How do you manage expectations or better frustrations and uncertainty? How do you avoid that and manage these expectations?
Okay, I'm going to answer you the way that I wish I would have known when I was a new immigrant. Because I had a ton of expectations and they made me miserable. I would tell you the way to manage expectations is to not have them. Is to focus on what you can do and focus so much on what you can do that what you can do is the best possible version of what that could be, and put all your energy in what's within your reach. It tends to happen that when our future or our stability or like our residence depends on other hands, there is an unavoidable gap of uncertainty, and we can do nothing about it. Nothing. Focus on what you can do. Make the best version of your actions and give it your all. It may compensate well for the inability to control that process.
Definitely. And everything that you shared from your own life about your partner, about your mother, this is just a healthy reminder of that, we're not alone in this situation. Everyone pretty much is facing these same problems around us. And largely, we all can take advice over here and react to it more positively. Preeti, who had asked us a question, tells us, thanks you for the advice, and says that, if she stays positive, maybe this will encourage her family to stop
Yeah,
sharing the negative news all the time and also stay positive. So, of course, all this advice has been really helping. So, thank you.
yeah, my
Um,
pleasure.
Another question here. So, a lot of times, it is said that having routines. Now, one way to manage stress and manage anxiety is to bring some order in your life, right?
Yeah,
Maybe start a morning routine, maybe focus on self care. Now is a good time. We often keep complaining about when will I ever have the time to do this or that because we're stuck in the office life.
yeah,
Now that we have the time, it's a good time to focus on those things. So of course, it's a good idea to do that any which way, but how does that help in coping with the situation better as well? If you could share your
yeah,
thoughts on that.
yeah, of course. And I think that what you said is so true. I want to challenge you to go to your fridge and look how your fridge is a mirror of your mind. We all have that we bought 10 years ago that we don't use, that has gone bad but is still there. Same thing with your thoughts. There are thoughts and habits that are there that when you bought them, they had a purpose, and now they're rot and they're smelling. Um, the thing about what's happening now is that the boundaries between our day life and our home life are getting super blurry. So putting like a crafted intention at how your day will look will make you feel safer, and take care of your safety first. Connect with those people. In case you don't have a safety network, it's a great moment to create one. Get closer to friends, connect with a community. It is the most important thing when planning your day. Make sure that you satisfy the need for safety and security. Super basic. Um, the other things that you can do when planning your day is workout. And again, it's not a workout as we say that, oh my God, I've been saying that I'm going to work and I'm going to take advantage of this finally. No, no. Bear in mind that your emotional and mental energy is usually placed it's stimulated by the environment. You go out, you work, you do and you don't do and whatever. Being concealed, there is an excess of energy here that needs to go out somewhere. And if you don't put an outlet, then you have too much and it creates havoc. So working out is more a thing of mental health. And I'm not telling you do burpees. I'm telling you go like climb stairs up and down. Get yourself a bit tired. It really, really helps. And finally, again, this may be a repetitive thing, but schedule when you're going to put your phone away, and get your eyes out of the news or out of social media or out of distraction. There's this guy that I really, really love that's called Simon Sinek. He says that the mind needs to have time to float. We usually do that when we walk, when we are in the subway and we are like, like wandering around. It's when the mind creates ideas. Right now, when we are concealed in a house, we are so focused on being productive that we are overstretching. So creating a plan and scheduling your day, minding what's important and what's basic, it's a very good way to do it. So that you plan for what actually adds value, which in my view is taking care of your safety, taking care of your body so that it affects your mental health in a positive fashion, and taking care of where your attention goes. So put your phone away after 8 or something of that sort. Yeah.
Thank you, Pedro, for sharing these wonderful tips with us. And, you've, of course, given a lot of advice, tips here and there that are very, very practical.
Thank
And
you.
before we wrap up, is there anything, last words of advice that you have over here as to how is it, anything that we've missed out on how can we continue to stay positive, use emotional intelligence, all these tools that we've learned today, of course, during this period and in the days to come, even when
Yes.
all of this ends?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Any
I would
message that you have?
I would say two things that are one of my favorite tools to harvest, to leverage emotional intelligence. The matrix that I showed in the beginning, there's an app for it. The app is called the Mood. What is it? I forgot the name of the app.
Don't worry about that. You can
Oh,
always share it with us
it's
later.
thank you. It's a mood meter.
Okay.
It's a mood meter, and there's this other one called Pixels. It helps you create awareness and put language into your words. The more that you can name how you're feeling, the more sense of control that you can get and choose to act from there. So getting into a routine of understanding what you're feeling as you feel it is a fantastic muscle builder for emotional intelligence. And the second one is, as this happens with a pandemic mindset, and afterwards, if you devote a moment of your day to learning something new, it makes wonders. Bear in mind that when your brain is on, it doesn't receive any new stimuli, it repeats thoughts and emotions from the day before. So if your days are the same over and over and over, and those were negative, then you can almost guarantee that tomorrow will be some sort of the same. So willingly choose to learn something that builds your skills, that gives you more opportunity to grow and to go and lead your attention to where you want to go. Those are my two best tools.
Thank you so much. And of course, I'd like to remind the viewers that you don't have to be worried about whether you were able to note the resources that Pedro mentioned here. We will be sharing them in the YouTube description of this live session, which will be there, and also in a follow-up email that we will be sharing with you. We list all the resources that he talked about. Thank you so much again to you, Pedro, for joining us
My
today,
pleasure.
for
Thank you.
sharing all of these, for your sharing your insight, for sharing all this wonderful advice that you had for our viewers. So, and thank you, of course, to all the viewers who've joined us today. And it's been a pleasure having you here, Pedro. And of course, as we continue these sessions as part of Café New Canadians, we'll have more advice coming in. And as of New Canadians, this session, Café New Canadians, was brought to you by New Canadians. And you can connect with us on social media. You can connect with us on Telegram. We're there in all possible social media channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or you could join us on Telegram as well. We're there too. Another way to stay updated about all the content that we keep posting is follow us. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter. That's a way that you can get all the tips and the interesting stories that we put out right there in your inbox every month. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, Café New Canadians is a virtual event series. We keep hosting a lot of sessions every week, typically to talk about these different situations that we are presented with right now amid this COVID-19 time. You can check out the sessions. The next two I can tell you right here. You can see on your screens as well. It is about how to steer your business out of the COVID-19 crisis, and a session on LinkedIn, which is the power of your story and brand presence. It's a good time to, of course, keep brushing up these skills and make your LinkedIn stronger than ever to, of course, heighten your chances of professional success later. This has been a wonderful session with Pedro. You can join us for our future sessions. But before you exit, I'd like to remind you that there's a little survey that we have for you. It'll barely take a minute of your time. It'll help us understand how we did today. And there's this chance for you to share your feedback. Tell us how we can do better. And thank you once again to Pedro, to the audience, for being wonderfully patient, sharing these questions with us. We'll try and answer. I see a few questions coming up even now. And of course, a lot of thank yous for you. We'll try and answer. If there are more questions that we see in the list right now, we'll try and share them in the list in the communication that we have next.